GOAT Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Jim Neander, the Neanderthal, the fantasy caveman. Go by a lot of names, some I can't mention here on audible airwaves. But great to have you back with us for another episode here. We're getting pretty close to the season now. We're 2 weeks out from the start of the season. I'm getting pretty excited about it. I mean, this is my favorite time of year, right when football season's about to start. I mean, I just get really amped up for it. I just can't wait for football Sundays. Yeah, I mean, that's really just the feeling I get all the time when I think about football. So 2 weeks till the start of the season, that means fantasy drafts are getting hot and heavy. A lot of teams, especially redraft leagues, are going to be drafting this weekend, some of them next weekend, even Labor Day weekend, which is, my preferred drafting time. I want to be as close to the start of the regular season as I possibly can be, especially in a year that's as uncertain as this one seems to be. So either way, we're all getting ready for our drafts. Those of you who haven't drafted yet, there's a lot of research to be done. There's a lot of, coach speak coming out of camps. We're getting a lot of information from beat writers from each of the different teams. So you got to keep your ear to the ground, or just keep watching the GOAT here. I'm going to help guide you through it, get you ready for your draft. So we're going to be doing a lot of draft prep episodes coming up here, and I want to start today because I just finished my first ever season-long projections. I've never actually sat down and hammered out an entire season-long projection before the season started. This was my first year doing it. It's a very painstaking and rather tedious undertaking, but it was rather fun. Obviously, I'm not doing much right now. I'm in the boat of a lot of people where I'm kind of stuck in the house most hours of most days. So I had plenty of time to really dig in and go through the trends and some different metrics and statistics that I might not normally dig into with my research. So as I was going through my projections and turn those into my rankings, I started to notice a lot of discrepancies between my rankings and of course the expert rankings. And I wanted to put together this first show to highlight the players that have the biggest gaps between my rankings and their current ADP, their average draft position. So we're going to call this episode ADP versus GDP. That's average draft position versus GOAT draft position. Okay, so we all ready to go? All right, so we're going to get started. We got a couple of quarterbacks. We're going to highlight, ones that I'm high on, ones that I think are going to far outplay their ADP, and some guys that I'm definitely down on that I think are guys that I do not want to draft anywhere near close to their current ADP. So just going to highlight these guys, one position at a time, and go from there. Hopefully you get some good information there. I was pretty surprised with where some of these guys landed. When you do these projections, you're not seeing them, in comparison to the other players at the same exact time. So after I finished all the projections, I started importing, all those players and their statistics into, spreadsheets for different positions, and was pretty surprised with some of my findings. As always, I do want to let you know that we are, doing the scoring as if it were a half-point PPR scoring league. So I think that gives you the best, kind of compromise between full point and standard. Of course, there are going to be some different, rankings for standard and full point. Some guys like, let's say, Derrick Henry or Nick Chubb, are a little bit higher value in standard because they don't have as many receptions, where guys like maybe Kareem Hunt, Tariq Cohen, the usual suspects, Austin Eckler, could have higher value because they are pass catching backs. So I think that half point PPR gives us, a nice midpoint there to look at. But if you ever have questions about my full point PPR rankings or my standard rankings, feel free to tweet me at Jim Neander, or tweet the show at GOATFF Podcast. You can also send me an email through the website. The website it's Jim at thegoatfantasyfootball.com. So go ahead and send me an email there if you want to. All right, let's go ahead and get started with my first quarterback that I have ranked a decent amount higher than their current ADP, and that's Matthew Stafford. So his current ADP is the quarterback 13, although I've been seeing him go a little bit later than that. I feel like more like quarterback 15, 16. So my current ranking on Matthew Stafford is the quarterback 9. Not expecting him to have some, monstrous season where he blows everybody out of the water. But at quarterback 9, this is a guy that I think you can safely draft in those later rounds, but expect to have an every week starter. Sometimes you punt quarterback, you draft near the end, and you're playing the streaming game. You're expecting to have to stream guys after a few weeks. I think with Matthew Stafford, I think he's going to be playable most weeks and give you a lot of those, those boom weeks. I think he's got to stay healthy, of course, but you can say that for any player. And until he got hurt last year, halfway through the season, he was having his best year to date. He was on pace for like 38 touchdowns and close to 5,000 yards. And I don't have him projected that high. I've got him projected for, it looks like, about 32 touchdowns, a little bit over 4,500 yards. So yes, I do have him projected for having a very good season. But the point here is that I have him projected above some guys like Carson Wentz, Josh Allen, Daniel Jones, Tom Brady. These are some guys that are going ahead of him in some drafts, Drew Brees, and I have him ahead of all of these guys. So I'm pretty high on the Lions offense this year as long as Stafford stays healthy. So I think Stafford's a pretty good quarterback pick there in those late rounds. If you're not wanting to necessarily week to week have to look for a streamer, but you're looking to get that late value, I think that Stafford's a guy that could be a quarterback 5 or 6. Without the rushing yards, I don't think he can break into the top 5. But where his current ADP is, I think you're getting great value there. I think you're going to be very happy with that. So let's move on to my second quarterback. So next is Gardner Minshew, the mustached one. So Gardner Minshew's current ADP is quarterback 23 now. I don't have him ranked as a quarterback 1. I have him ranked as the quarterback number 14 in my my projections. But between number 12 and number 14, there's only a couple of points. So he very easily could be number 12 on my list here. Or excuse me, he could be number 13 on my list here. Pretty easily with just a few more points. So with his current ADP, I understand the Jacksonville Jaguars are not going to be a great team. They're not, kind of a sexy team to use for fantasy purposes. But, he showed a lot in his first year as a guy that wasn't expected to start in his first season. They gave Nick Foles all that money. Comes in as a late round draft pick, gets thrown right to the wolves right away. Foles gets hurt, and throughout the season showed a lot to me. First of all, I love the confidence, right? The moxie, the attitude. Love to see that in a young quarterback that's a low draft pick that gets his chance. But he was really good on deep passes. He gave you that rushing floor, which I think people are underestimating the rushing floor. I've got him projected for just short of 400 yards rushing, and that's a really nice baseline for your quarterback. And then they also have Jay Gruden now as the offensive coordinator. I think he's going to be an upgrade in play calling. And, you add that with the fact that they're probably still going to be a pretty bad team defensively, especially. They're going to be playing from behind and having to throw the ball. So I just think that, again, don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying Gardner Minshew's going to be a breakout candidate. But, again, if you're going late into the rounds and even later than a guy like Matthew Stafford, you're going way late. I like Gardner Minshew as a guy that you're going to be able to play a lot of weeks throughout the season and get some pretty good weeks. You may have to play the matchups a little bit, but when you're going that late, he's a guy that I like. I actually have him just a little bit ahead of Ben Roethlisberger and Jared Goff in total points. So those are two guys that are definitely popular late round quarterback picks that I have Gardner Minshew just ahead of. Now, I want to transition here because there's a guy that I have, Gardner Minshew, less than 1 point behind in total points for the season. And this is going to be my first quarterback we're going to talk about that I'm low on compared to their ADP. So we're going to talk about Buffalo's Josh Allen. Listen, I'm a Buffalo fan. You see the jersey behind me. I'm a Buffalo guy, so it pains me to say this. But I just don't think Josh Allen's going to have that top 10, top 8 kind of year that a lot of people are projecting from him. I have Josh Allen as my quarterback 13, and his current ADP is quarterback 8. And that's really the problem there. It's not that I don't think Josh Allen's going to have a decent season, but, I look at the inaccuracy. I look at a team that wants to play really tough defense and probably slow the game down. I've only got Allen for just about 500 pass attempts, and the rushing, coming down a little bit, he had an absurd amount of rushing touchdowns. I still have him for 24 passing touchdowns and 6 rushing touchdowns. It's 30 combined touchdowns. So it's not that I'm not projecting him to have a very good season and be a strong fantasy asset for different times throughout the year. It's just that, when I can wait and get a Gardner Minshew at the very end of the draft instead of getting Josh Allen, in round 8, 9, wherever he's going as the quarterback 7 or 8, I'm going to do that all day long. I don't see the upside being huge for Josh Allen. I know they upgraded the receiving core, Stephon Diggs. That should help with the deep ball. I just don't see it. I see a team that wants to run, and I see a team that wants to slow the game down and not run as many plays. So I'm a little bit down on Josh Allen. I've got them right next to each other. As I said, I've got 1 point separating Gardner Minshew and Josh Allen in season-long point projections. So, just something to chew on. Now, my next one's a little bit controversial, and when I looked at it and I looked at the numbers, this was one that really stuck out to me because it scares me how low I have him. But we're going to talk about Drew Brees. So, he's a legend. I'm not going to make any bones about it. But at the end of the day, this is about this season, right? This year, 2020, fantasy football. Not what have you done for me, for the last 17 years. So you see the, attempts going down over the years, the last 3 years. You see the yards per attempt going down. You see a team that, has actually gotten a good amount better on defense than they were, in those years where he was throwing for 5,000 yards, on a yearly basis. So I just, I look at all of these things and I see a quarterback that's going to be great for NFL purposes, right? He's going to be very efficient. He's going to lead the Saints to a very good season. They're going to be a playoff contender, maybe even a Super Bowl contender. All that's good and well, but I only have him here for just over 4,000 yards, 4,220, 29 touchdowns, and he doesn't add anything on the ground. And without 45 to 5,000 yards and 30 plus touchdowns, it's going to be hard to break into those top echelon quarterbacks that have those rushing baselines. So I'm pretty far down on Brees this year. I'm going to just let him go and let him go and let him go. I'm not going to have him on any team more than likely because he is being drafted by people. Again, he's the quarterback 7 right now, and I'm at 18. So that scares me. I might be a little too far down on him. I've got him just behind Ryan Tannehill and Jared Goff. And it's not because he's not a better quarterback. Again, it's just that without the rushing baseline and then throwing the ball less, and throwing the ball short. He's not launching the ball out there. Emmanuel Sanders is not necessarily gonna help the yard, the air yards per target. So I'm just not seeing it. So there you go. My 2 quarterbacks I'm pretty high on compared to their ADP: Matthew Stafford, Gardner Minshew, and a couple of quarterbacks I'm pretty low on: Josh Allen and Drew Brees. Let's move it on to running back here. We're going to go 3 each. We're going to go 3 guys here in each category. We're going to start with all the guys that I'm high on. This one, it wasn't surprising that I was kind of high on him because I am doing most of my projections based on the fact that people are going to play 16 games. There are very few instances where I'm automatically taking games away from people because of injury, and that's only because they're already expected to miss games to start the season, or just year after year after year. That's the track record. Not one injury is going to make me do that. So you could argue that this guy could be in either category. My first guy is James Conner. So James Conner is the 18th running back, being picked off the board, right? I've got him as my running back 9. And I know that's kind of a stretch for a lot of people to have him as a running back 1, especially in that top 10. But as far as my projections for his stats for the year, I've got him getting quite a lot of targets this year. I look at him, and what he did, when Big Ben was there, and I think about all those targets that he had, and I just think he's in line for a pretty big year if he can stay healthy. I've got him for 226 carries on the year, so I'm not expecting him to be a 275 carry back by any means. But it's really the receptions. 65 receptions on 86 targets puts him, in the upper echelon of receiving backs as far as numbers go. I also have him scoring, 10 touchdowns on the ground and 3 through the air. So those factors combined, I've got him pretty high up there. I've got him ahead of Joe Mixon, ahead of Clyde Edwards-Helaire. These are guys that are definitely going ahead of James Conner. You can get James Conner in the 3rd round in a lot of drafts. Starting to creep up into that end of the 2nd round in a lot of the expert drafts, but I think in most home drafts he'll go in the 3rd. And if you don't have, a running back by round 3, I think he's the perfect target as a guy that could be your running back 1, in the 3rd round when you've gone with either, you picked one of the top quarterbacks, one of the top tight ends, or you went, top flight receiver 2 times in a row. Whatever combination you went with. You don't have a running back in round 3. I think he's great. If you do have one running back, this could be, again, a running back 1 that you get as your RB2 in the 3rd round. I'm all over James Conner this year. I just want to hear, a little more out of training camp. I know there's Benny Snell is there, Anthony McFarland is there, the new draft pick. But Mike Tomlin has shown he will lean on his running back when he can be leaned on. So that's what I'm betting on this year for James Conner. The health has to be there, but if it's there, I'm looking at an RB1 for sure. So pretty good value there. All right, my next guy, I'm definitely a little bit worried about because of the news that's coming out of camp right now with his leg is DeAndre Swift. So DeAndre Swift, the running back for the Detroit Lions, rookie running back, was for a lot of people, myself included, considered probably the highest running back prospect out of this year. Just amazing playmaking ability, just passes the eye test in every way for a running back, playmaking running back. So his current ADP is the running back 27. And I actually ranked him out as the running back 17. A little bit aggressive with the receptions here now. I know it's been a few years since a Detroit running back has been, very heavily involved in the pass game, but it wasn't that long ago when Theo Riddick was getting 70 plus targets, per season from Matthew Stafford. And I think a lot of it's just about a guy that has the ability to do that with the passing game. And I think when he sees, the playmaking ability of DeAndre Swift, he will become a 3-down back for the most part, as long as the leg is holding up. And I got him getting 75 targets. That might be a little bit excessive, and I might have to push that down into the low 60s. But right now, I'm just seeing that for him. I'm kind of expecting a big year for him, just under 1,000 yards on the ground, 6 touchdowns. So I'm not, expecting some explosive year on the ground. But for me, I think it's going to be the unexpected level of volume in the passing game that's going to elevate DeAndre Swift into an RB2. Just as far as it's concerned, where I have Kerryon Johnson, I do have Kerryon Johnson as the running back 31. I think this team's going to run the ball a good amount. They're going to run a lot of plays. I do think they're going to be in the top 5 in total plays run throughout the season. So I think there's going to be plenty of work to go around for running backs as well as receivers on this team. So that would obviously explain why I have Stafford high as well as DeAndre Swift. But he's definitely someone I might be targeting. He's falling into that 5th, 6th round. And after I already have 2 running backs and I start filling out my team, he along with Cam Akers are the kind of guys I'm going to target in that 6th, 5th round. If they fall to the 6th, that's really where I want to target them. And grab one of those guys as my possible flex, as a bench guy that can, possibly have a wide receiver play in my flex, but also might be, a weekly starter at running back, depending on injuries and, whatever else might happen. If I did go James Conner early, maybe I would get a DeAndre Swift with the injury risk for a James Conner. So, looking at that. All right, my next guy is definitely a current darling of the experts. So, I don't want to spend too much time on him, but it is Ronald Jones. You're probably hearing a lot about Ronald Jones right now, so you're probably sick of it. I was looking for some other guys, but the ADP gap between where his current ADP is and where my ranking is was just so extreme that, I kind of had to go with him there. His current ADP is running back 32, and I have him as running back 18. So, you're hearing a lot of things out of camp. I know they brought LaShawn McCoy in, and some people are saying, well, they're gonna let the veteran back in there as far as pass protection goes to help out Tom Brady, and I do see the logic in that. There's definitely sense in that narrative. I just think they're gonna want playmakers on the field with Tom Brady throwing to that receiving core. You're not really gonna be able to stack the box and blitz him too often. You can get the ball out quick to Chris Godwin, to Rob Gronkowski. I think there's gonna be the dump offs also. We forget how much Tom Brady liked to throw the ball to his running backs. So, I've got him, for a decent amount of work here. 64 targets on the season, 221 rushes, going to combine for, looks like, just about 1,300 total yards, 11 touchdowns. It's a really nice season. I don't think I'm, putting him outside the realm of possibility. He could actually wind up a little bit higher than that. I don't see his ceiling, necessarily being a running back 1, but he could be a nice, high running back 2 or, mid-tier running back 2, which is where I have him. But right now you're getting him drafted as the running back 32. And I think that's just a great steal. We haven't heard enough from Keyshawn Vaughn. We haven't heard, or we haven't seen enough from LaShawn McCoy. I mean, he was in Andy Reid's offense last year and was putting up measly numbers with the opportunities that he had. So, I don't know. I'm thinking I'm getting on board. It could be because I'm hearing it too much. Sometimes you're just susceptible to hearing the same thing and you get convinced, right? So I'm hearing all the experts, getting high on Ronald Jones, and I guess I am also. So there we go. All right, let's talk about running backs that I am down on now. This one could make me look bad because I was really down on him last year also, and obviously wasn't a smart thing. So Derrick Henry is my pick here. He's the running back 6, and therein lies the problem. He's my 13th ranked running back. I'm pretty sure we saw the very best Derrick Henry can do in a season last year, even if the receiving numbers come up a little bit, which they very well might. They're not going to come up a lot. And I also think he's not going to be able to, recreate the efficiency he had on the ground. Just the volume, the touchdowns, everything about it just seemed like you're drafting the absolute very best thing that can happen with Derrick Henry. In half-point PPR, I'm even less excited. If it was standard, maybe he crawls up to that, top 6, but not in half-point PPR, definitely not in full-point PPR. So, I'm looking at, what I'm looking at for what I have planned out for Derrick Henry this season as far as the stats go. Sorry. So I still have 286 rushing attempts. Going to be one of the top 3 in attempts for the year. 1,345 yards, 12 touchdowns. I mean, I still have him having an all-pro season at running back and being fantastic. The problem is, without the passing down work, if the touchdowns regress, which they should, and the yardage comes down, which it should, even just a little bit, he's going to fall down a little bit. I have other running backs. You see just how much more involved they are in the passing game, and that's where I have all these guys above him are in the 45, plus reception range, and I have him for 21 receptions. And that's just too many points and yards to give up and to have to make up in the rushing game. So that's why he falls there for me. I won't have him on any teams because he's just not falling that low, right? You got to draft him a lot higher than that if you want to get him. So, unfortunately, I won't have Derrick Henry. I said that last year. He made me look bad. Another guy that made me look bad last year was Leonard Fournette. He was going to be on this list, but his ADP is dropping a lot. So we're getting a lot closer to my ranking and his ADP. So he's off this list, but if Henry and Fournette ball out again this year, then egg on my face. I don't know what else to say about it. I'll have to move on and turn in my GOAT card. All right, number 2 on this list is Nick Chubb. You know the narrative here behind the question mark with Nick Chubb, and it's all about Kareem Hunt, right? So you have Kevin Stefanski coming to Cleveland, so we know it's going to be a run-heavy offense, and that's fine for me because I don't have him with a shortage of work. I have him with 267 carries on the season, almost 1,300 yards and 8 touchdowns. The problem here is 25 receptions on 35 targets, and for me, that's just the end of the story. I think Kareem Hunt is a much better pass catcher than Nick Chubb is. Nick Chubb's a good receiving running back, and Kareem Hunt is an excellent, receiving running back, and that's the difference here. So when I look at my Kareem Hunt expectations, less than half the carries, about 118 carries for Kareem Hunt, so not that many, but 80 targets for Kareem Hunt. That's assuming he's going to get some work, outside of the backfield as well, which I think he will. I think you'll see him a little bit in the slot. I think you'll see him, lined up when there's 2 running backs. You'll see both him and Chubb on the field. He'll get some receptions that way. So I know 80 is a big, big number. I just think that the running backs are going to be extremely heavily involved in the Cleveland offense this year. I do like Kareem Hunt, compared to his ADP, but ADP is going up right now for Kareem Hunt, so got to keep an eye on that. But Nick Chubb, ADP number 8, running back number 8, and he's my number 20 running back on the season. So that worries me a little bit. Obviously, I won't have any Nick Chubb this year. He's going sometimes in the first round, earlier in the offseason. Now, as we get later into the offseason, he's going into the second round. I'm seeing him, early second, mid-second, and starting to drop. Now, I guess the question becomes, what would be the breaking point for me with Nick Chubb? And it's absolutely the end of the second round. I mean, if it's, the 10th, 11th, or 12th pick in the second round and Nick Chubb is still there, I don't think I could deny the volume there because he would be the last of that tier that would still be there. It's hard to imagine. Aaron Jones is gone. A lot of those guys are gone. And I would have him, ahead of some of those guys like David Montgomery, in that range. So we'll see. For me, it's end of the second round, early third, but he's not going to go there. So move on to my third pick here is Melvin Gordon. It's a very crowded backfield in Denver. I know they gave him some decent money to go there, but you got Philip Lindsay, who was an All-Pro, looks great. Just really passes the eye test every time he touches the ball. He's got playmaking ability. You still have Royce Freeman there, to possibly gobble up a little bit of goal line work. We don't know how much, and we don't know how much. I'm trying to think of his name right now. We don't know how much Drew Lock is going to dump down to the running backs. Melvin Gordon came from LA, from the Phillip Rivers, king of the dump off, Rivers, and he's not going there, right? So you have a lot of different things to deal with here. An offense that we don't know how good it's going to be with a second-year quarterback. We're just not sure. They added a lot of weapons, so you could see a lot of progression there with the offense, but we're not sure. You have Philip Lindsay, you have the emergence of Noah Fant, Jerry Jeudy, one of the top, if not the top wide receiver in the class, going on that team. There's just a lot to think about. So with Melvin Gordon, I'm looking at him and I'm like, how much work is he really going to get? I've got him for under 200 carries. He's never been the most efficient running back. He needs the volume. And I've got him for, 52 targets, 37 receptions. So, not bad. But nowhere near where he's being drafted, right? The 16th running back off the board. I've got him as running back 24, barely hanging on as a running back 2. But the other issue is the upside's not there for him with Melvin Gordon. As long as Philip Lindsay's there, I just don't see any upside where he can be, a top 12, kind of running back. So if you're drafting him as the running back 16, then he has almost no chance to be top 12. I just don't see the value there. So I don't know. You'll have to correct me if I'm wrong. So let's recap that real quick. The 3 running backs I'm really high on for their value: James Conner, DeAndre Swift, Ronald Jones. The 3 running backs I am off of for their value: Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb, and Melvin Gordon. All right, let's keep it rolling here. All right, we're gonna go to wide receivers now. Wide receiver is where I have by far my biggest. I don't want to say stretch, but I'm planting my flag here. And I want to start with Michael Gallup. So Michael Gallup was a guy that was on a few of my rosters last year. Going into that third year where, people talk about that third year wide receiver, where that's the year where they really, kind of get it. He was the wide receiver, I believe, 22 in 14 games last year. And there's going to be a ton of upside in this offense. So what are people saying? What's the reason to not like Michael Gallup? Well, you're hearing CeeDee Lamb, right? And, Amari Cooper, you're hearing CeeDee Lamb. Blake Jarwin's supposed to have, a little emergence, for a lot of people. So here's the problem with all of those things, right? One, you have 166, I think, evacuated targets between just Randall Cobb and Jason Witten alone, right? So, all right. So Blake Jarwin had his own 40-something targets last year. You take those 83 targets from, Jason Witten, he's not going to get all of those. Let's say Blake Jarwin's a 100-target kind of guy, right? Which I think he could be. Let's say he's a 100-target kind of guy. There's still targets, there that are not being used from the tight end. Now you go to CeeDee Lamb. Well, Randall Cobb's gone. He had his own 83 targets. Now, CeeDee Lamb can be an excellent rookie, prospect, but 83 targets would still be a pretty big number for a rookie in a crowded offense. Now, if CeeDee Lamb was coming into an offense where, he's the number one, if he was going to Philly, I'd say 80-something targets, no problem, right? But going to an offense where you're going to have a healthy Amari Cooper, you're going to have a healthy Michael Gallup, and then Blake Jarwin and Zeke, getting to 80-something targets for the tight end, for CeeDee Lamb for the third wide receiver is still going to be a pretty good number for him to get to. So now we look at the Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, targets. They were both almost equally targeted last year, almost equal in the points per game last year. And, you had some boom games for Cooper. You had a lot of games where he disappeared, which has always been kind of the MO for Cooper. And they talk about the games that he disappears being the ones that are against the best cornerbacks. I see this year being the one where Michael Gallup is the number one wide receiver for the Dallas Cowboys. And I have him, I want to make sure you're ready for it so you know really what number I have him as. I have Michael Gallup as the number 7 wide receiver in half-point PPR. Number 7. So where's he being drafted? 29. The ADP is 29 right now. I've got him at number 7. Next question is going to be, where do I have Amari Cooper? I have Amari Cooper as wide receiver 20. So both having very good years. That's 115 targets for Amari Cooper in this offense. But I do have Michael Gallup set up for 131 targets. I think it's very, very reachable. 10 touchdowns, 1,350 yards. Am I reaching a little bit? Yes, I am. Do I think it's absolutely possible? 100%. There's no doubt that that kind of season is possible for Michael Gallup. And let's just call this the GOAT flag right here. Right in the sand. The GOAT flag is in the sand. I can hear it already. What are y'all saying?
Inconceivable!
No. I do not think you know what this word means. Very conceivable. I definitely think it can happen. I'm not saying it's going to happen. Again, let me say this clearly. Don't hear what I'm not saying. Don't draft Michael Gallup as the 7th receiver off the board. Why not? Because even though I think he's the 7th best receiver this year, he's being drafted at ADP 29, right? So if we're looking at our wide receivers and we're saying, all right, well, ADP 29, where does that put us? So that means, who are we looking at around ADP 29, right? You're looking at Jarvis Landry. You're looking at Stephon Diggs, T.Y. Hilton, Tyler Boyd, right? You're looking at these guys. So if you're looking at all of those guys, for me, it's an easy choice at that point. You're going Michael Gallup. You could even go a little higher than that. Let's look at that next tier, the guys that are, being drafted around wide receiver 20, right? Tyler Lockett, I'm not going to put him there because you're going to find out in a minute. But, Terry McLaurin, DJ Chark, DK Metcalf, Cortland Sutton, all these are great receivers, and I have different, projections for all of them. I have Michael Gallup well ahead of everyone here. The last argument I want to make before I move on, because we're getting a little long-winded here, is that, he was wide receiver 22 in 14 games last year. If you draft him as the wide receiver 20 off the board, right, which is still 9, picks of value, ADP 29, which is well over a round, might be a round and a half, if not more, of ADP value. What's the risk there? Do you really think Michael Gallup's going to be outside the top 24 or far outside of it? I think it's extraordinarily unlikely that he can be far outside wide receiver 2 range. So I think the risk is minimal to none. The upside is huge. Michael Gallup, my player of the year right now. He is the GOAT, the 2020 GOAT. Michael Gallup, there you go. All right, let's go. Hold me to it. Let's move it on here. All right, my number 2 guy, and that's why I said hold on here, because I want to bring him up, is going to be Tyler Lockett. Love Tyler Lockett this year. Before he got injured, he was on a huge pace last year. Monstrous pace. So he's a little higher in ADP. Right now, his ADP is the wide receiver 19 off the board. I have him as wide receiver 8, one slot behind Michael Gallup. One slot. I've got him for, 118, or excuse me, the same amount of targets, 131 targets as Tyler Lockett, but I've got him having some more receptions here, with Russell Wilson. They have a great rapport. Got 92 receptions, 1,230 yards, and 10 touchdowns. So, listen, I've got him having a very big year myself, all right? Tyler Lockett's going to have a huge season. Does not mean I'm off of DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf is my wide receiver 17 with 121 targets. Listen, I do think, all right, so it's a lot of the offseason is about what narrative do you buy. I buy the narrative of letting Russ cook, right? Mr. Unlimited, all the jokes, right? Mr. Unlimited. But the truth is, I do think they're going to throw the ball more. They're having issues keeping their running backs healthy. And that's just the way the NFL's going. There were so many games last year where they were closer than they needed to be for the Seahawks. I think if you're letting Russ throw, then you're ahead by a touchdown or two in the fourth quarter of some of those games where you're a field goal behind or a field goal ahead and you're just scrapping away. Russell Wilson is too good to hold him back anymore. You just gotta let Russ do his thing, man. I think they're going to. I got Russ pretty high this year. I've got a lot of guys on Seattle pretty high this year. So go ahead, lock it up. Tyler Lockett, if you're looking for that second, third round wide receiver, I definitely have him ahead of guys like Juju Smith-Schuster, Devontae Parker, Odell Beckham Jr. These are guys that are going ahead of him, and I have him above them for sure. So that's my second guy. I just mentioned my third, which is Devontae Parker. So, all right, Devontae Parker, finished the year gangbusters last year. We know that. So we know the story here. We waited years and years. It never happened. Then why did it all of a sudden happen last year? Who knows? Who knows what clicked? We were hearing things in preseason that didn't sound good. Then all of a sudden he was, all into it. Showed out in the second half with Ryan Fitzpatrick. So I've got him as my wide receiver 12 on the season. His ADP is wide receiver 21. Not the hugest gap, but I just wanted to put my confidence behind Devontae Parker because I do believe, I think, and I believe that Ryan Fitzpatrick should start pretty much the whole season for the Miami Dolphins. I'm not sure how much drop-off it'll be if Tua comes in, but I think Ryan Fitzpatrick should start the whole season basically, and I think he will keep them, competitive enough and winning enough games that they'll want to keep him in and let Tua learn from him for a year, get used to the speed of the NFL, get healthy, all that good stuff. I know Preston Williams is coming back. That's the other part of the story, that he was a lot better after Preston Williams left with the injury. I know people say Williams looks great in preseason, in camp, but coming back from an ACL, you never know how it's going to react. And I just think that the trust between Parker and Fitzpatrick was developed last year. They're going to air the ball out. They're going to be behind in games. And I think you're going to have some of those big games where he catches, that 50-yard touchdown in the fourth quarter after already having a decent game. And you're going to have some big weeks from Parker. Talking about I'm in love with Parker. I'm a little scared to draft him. I'm not going to lie. But when I did my projections, I got him as wide receiver 12. And so he will wind up on some of my teams with his ADP of 21. Just so you know, I'm going to have him on some teams. And I'm going to be sweating it. There's no doubt about it. I'm going to be sweating it for sure. We'll just have to see what happens, right? All right, so let's go to the wide receivers I'm not so high on. Let's start with D-Hop, Dwayne Hopkins. Love Dwayne Hopkins. Yeah, love Dwayne Hopkins, of course. Why wouldn't you, right? Nothing not to love about the guy. What to not love about the guy is that I'm not even saying his name right, because I'm looking at my paper and I'm like, that's why. If you saw it, it sounded weird, right? Yeah, DeAndre Hopkins, the guy's only top 3 wide receiver for like the last decade. DeAndre Hopkins moves from Houston to Arizona. Goes to the air raid offense with Cliff Kingsbury and Kyler Murray and Christian Kirk and Larry Fitzgerald, Kenyon Drake, all the boys. We're expecting big offensive numbers out of Arizona this year. So what's the problem, Jim? What's the problem here, buddy? The problem is there's just only so many targets that can go around. DeAndre Hopkins, holy crap, I'm struggling. DeAndre Hopkins has had 150 plus targets in most seasons, and I just have trouble seeing that for him this year. I still have him up there at 128 targets, which I think will be about 125, almost 1,100 yards, and 9 touchdowns. There's nothing wrong with that season, but his ADP is wide receiver 5. So let's say I'm a little bit off. I have him as wide receiver 19. Let's say he's wide receiver 12. Would you be happy? Drafting him at wide receiver 5 and getting the wide receiver 12. I don't think so. Let alone if he's closer to my ranking at wide receiver 19. The fact of the matter is Christian Kirk is an excellent receiver. He's going to get his targets. I want to try to find out where I have some of these guys targeted for, if I can find them real quick for you. Christian Kirk, I've got here, with his own 107 targets. So just a little bit more than he had last year. He missed a few games. And I do have Larry Fitzgerald coming down in targets, down to 88. So, and he could be a 100-target kind of guy. Kenyon Drake will be heavily targeted out of the backfield. They're going to run 4 wide receiver sets, more than anyone else in the league. So, the reasons go on and on and on. It's nothing about DeAndre Hopkins not being one of the best wide receivers in the league. He absolutely is. It's just that he's only going to be limited in targets, so much by this offense. And frankly, Kyler Murray has not shown the ability to, get the ball into the end zone with the success that Deshaun Watson has proven to. Deshaun Watson's one of the best quarterbacks at throwing the ball, into the end zone and completing the pass. He's a big part of that. Hopkins is a big part of that. I think he'll help Kyler Murray with his touchdown numbers this year, but I'm just not going anywhere near him at ADP 5. Allen Robinson. So, all right, Robinson made me look, pretty bad last year. Ton of receptions, ton of targets last year. I mean, a whole ton of targets last year, right? 155 or so. I don't have him coming down, all that much, right? I've got him for 139 targets, 86 receptions, just over 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns. I think part of it, you got to understand, part of my narrative this year is that I do think that the passing numbers will be off the charts this year. I'm expecting the passing numbers to be absolutely absurd this year, closer to 2018 than they were to 2019. So, a lot of my numbers are a little bit inflated just because my general feeling that the passing and receiving numbers will be more inflated this year, and the rushing numbers, specifically the actual rushing numbers, not the running back numbers, because they're going to get a lot of targets. but the actual rushing yardage will be down a little bit this year, and I think we're going to see a lot of work into pass game. So, 1,000 yards, 86 catches, and 8 touchdowns puts him at wide receiver 24 in my rankings. Now, the other part of this is when you get to this range here, right? There's not that many points separating, a lot of spots. So we were talking about DeAndre Hopkins as number 19 and Allen Robinson at number 24, but I have them separated by 10 points. That's basically, one 30-yard touchdown, or a couple of, 40-yard plays, whatever you call it. It's not a lot of yards, not a lot of plays over the course of a whole season, right? So you can easily, move up. I can have him, I can see it going up to number 18 on him, but he's the ADP 10 right now, and I just don't like Chicago. I got to be honest with you. Whether it's Trubisky or Foles, I'm not going to be in love with the offense. They did add Jimmy Graham. I know, I get it. He's old and a little bit, used, but they added him anyway. Anthony Miller's in his third year. I think he'll get an increased target share. So I just think there's some, some signs there that he's not going to be a wide receiver 1. I'm staying away from Allen Robinson at his current ADP of ADP 10. So if he falls far enough, I'll look at him. But I'm looking at other guys that are in that range for me that are falling, and I've got DJ Chark ahead of him. DJ Chark is well below him in ADP. DJ Chark is the number 22 wide receiver off the board, and I've got him as a wide receiver 21, but obviously ahead of Allen Robinson. So, all right, last wide receiver on my naughty list, my list that I'm low on is Courtland Sutton. So I already mentioned Melvin Gordon in the guys I'm down on. So maybe not the biggest shock here. I'm kind of down on just the expectations for Denver's offense from a fantasy football perspective because of the addition of so many weapons. Again, we talked about the backfield, so they already had Phillip Lindsay and Royce Freeman. They add Melvin Gordon, might make the team better. I don't think makes the fantasy football players better. So in the wide receivers, you had Courtland Sutton, who had basically the run of the land last year, right? You had a little bit of Deshaun Hamilton, a little bit of Noah Fant coming on late. But the reality was you were getting targeted, ad nauseum if you were Courtland Sutton last year. So now you add Jerry Jeudy, the top wide receiver prospect in many people's eyes. You also have KJ Hamler, their second-round pick, who is dealing with a little bit of injury right now, so that can help Courtland Sutton a little bit. But Hamler will come back. There's also the expected second-year, progression of Noah Fant, who looks like he might be one of the best playmaking tight ends in the league this year. So, there's a lot of things to think about with Courtland Sutton. He's being drafted as the wide receiver 18 right now, and I have him as my wide receiver 28, so outside of that wide receiver 2 range. So what does that look like for his stats? I got him being targeted 116 times on the season, so still with a decent share of targets, going to be the most targeted guy in that offense, 75 receptions, almost 1,100 yards, and then, 6 touchdowns. So, not low, but not high either, right in the middle there, right? So, I just, at ADP 18, it's a little bit too rich for my blood. When I look at my 18th, ranked wide receivers, I have guys like DK Metcalf, Adam Thielen, DeAndre Hopkins, DJ Chark, some of these guys I'm more down on than others. But, if you're telling me the 18th pick comes up, and I have a choice between, the 18th wide receiver, I'm in that range, and I'm thinking DK Metcalf or Courtland Sutton, it's not even a question of going DK Metcalf. So, it's not that I don't like Courtland Sutton. I mean, he showed a lot of playmaking ability last year. I think he's got a ton of potential. He makes, Denver and Drew Lock better. It's just, what is he going to do for fantasy? I don't think he's going to be a wide receiver 2. And I don't think the upside is there for high-end wide receiver 2 or even wide receiver 1 conversation. I think he's firmly planted in that, low-end wide receiver 2 upside category. So, I'm not drafting that. I'm drafting upside. All right, let's go to tight end so we can finish this up. A couple of names. All right, tight end, here's the hard one. I think the guys that I'm high on, you're hearing about a lot. Maybe they're not as high as I am, but you're hearing about these guys a lot. But the guys I'm low on, hopefully, you're going to listen to because I think they're going egregiously high. So let's talk about the guys I like. Hayden Hurst, you're hearing a ton about Hayden Hurst in the offseason. So I didn't want to, keep beating the drum on Hayden Hurst. I get it. Tons of experts are on Hayden Hurst. My question is, where do they really have him, right? Because that's what it comes down to. If you're telling me, well, Hayden Hurst is being, drafted as the 15th or 13th ADP, tight end, but you think he could be top 10, then all right. I mean, that's cool and all. I have Hayden Hurst as my number 4 tight end on the season, okay? Just want to make sure you heard that. Number 4 tight end on the season. So, all right, let's talk about, the four and the pros and cons list for Hayden Hurst, right? High draft pick, kind of got stuck behind a great tight end in Mark Andrews once he got healthy. So we see those things. Maybe we just didn't get to see what we needed out of Hayden Hurst, right? We also, the good things, we got an offense that was targeting the tight end position extremely heavily last year. Austin Hooper's gone, so all those targets are open. We have an offense that most people expect to be one of the highest, if not the highest, in pass attempts on the season. I've got them, I think, number 2, but maybe number 1 on pass attempts for the season. They were by far the highest last year. I think they'll be a little better team this year, so it's going to come down a little bit. And I think it's an offense that you have to pay attention to the other weapons, right? You have, 2 amazing receivers in Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley. You've got Todd Gurley now coming out of the backfield. So I think you've got, other places where you have to, pay attention if you're a defense, and that Hayden Hurst will have many, many opportunities. Now, let's talk about the numbers. 109 targets is very, very rich. I only have 6 tight ends reaching the 100 target mark. And he's one of them. So that could definitely not happen. Listen, I get it. That 109 targets could be 72, in which case I'm going to be way, way off. But let's just say it's not. I've got him for 75 catches, 800 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Nothing out of control. 6 touchdowns is solid for good starting tight end. So, I've got him just a few points ahead of Zach Ertz and Darren Waller. So to me, that's that third tier, right? So let's talk about tight end tiers. I've got Kelsey and Kittle tier 1. I've got Mark Andrews tier 2 by himself because of the point gap between him and Hayden Hurst. So Mark Andrews is tier 2 by himself. And then I have in tier 3 Hayden Hurst, Zach Ertz, Darren Waller, and Evan Ingram. And you could squeeze Tyler Higbee in there. They're all in that kind of next tier. And all those guys, are going various places. I'm not drafting any of them except for Hayden Hurst. He's the only one in that top 7 or 8 that I just listed. That's a huge value, right? I mean, I want some of these other guys, of course. I would take Kelsey, or Kittle if they went, and first pick in the 3rd round. I would take either one of them. Andrews in the 4th round, I would take, Ertz in the 5th maybe. But they're all going around at least ahead of that, so I don't like it. So for me, Hayden Hurst is the first guy with huge value that I would be drafting. So I love his potential, right? So let's talk about, what if. Let's say he gets those 73, targets, right? So right now, my number 12 tight end is Jared Cook. And I have Jared Cook with 73 targets, 52 receptions, and 6 touchdowns. The touchdowns because it's Drew Brees. But that would be tight end number 12. So you can get him at right around there, ADP number 13. You could draft him as tight end 12, and I think, the odds that he finishes lower than that are minimal. And if he's lower, it's going to be right within a few points, right? Because when you get to that point of tight ends, for the course of a season, you're talking about 10, 12 points differentiates 6 to 8 spots in tight ends. So, I'm big on Hayden Hurst. I'm also big on Blake Jarwin now. Again, like I said, both these guys you're hearing a lot about. A lot of guys have Blake Jarwin as a breakout candidate, and we just talked about it with Michael Gallup. It's all the targets, right? He had 40-something targets. Now you have 80-something Jason Witten targets going away from Dak Prescott, one of the top passing quarterbacks in the league. And the opportunity is huge. So his ADP right now is tight end 22. It's definitely going up, though. It will probably be more like ADP 16, 17, maybe even a little bit higher than that, honestly. I have him as tight end 9. And therein lies the value. You can wait and wait and wait and wait and wait and grab Blake Jarwin, and I think you have a weekly starter. Because I don't think, unlike, maybe we saw from like Tyler Higbee where, there was monstrous weeks, I think Blake Jarwin will get 5 targets a week, right? I think you can count on it. I really do. I think you can count on 5 targets a week, sometimes 7 or 8, maybe you have some of those crazy weeks with more. But you just tell me my tight end's going to have 5 targets every week in a high-powered offense, and I can get them late in the draft, and count me in, man. I'm in. I'm all for it. You know what I mean? I love that. So, All right. Let's finish this up here. We're getting close to the hour mark. All right, first tight end I'm low on, Hunter Henry. I'm low on the Chargers offense right now as a whole. Maybe they'll get the Hard Knocks bump from me. I don't know. So far they haven't. I'm just low on this offense. I don't really like, I like that it could be a good offense. I don't mind Tyrod Taylor. I think he could be a decent quarterback and can be decent for some of these options. But when I look at, Austin Eckler, I look at Keenan Allen, and I look at Hunter Henry, the main three guys on this team, and I just think they're going too high. And that's just the end of it, right? So Hunter Henry right now is the tight end 6. Tight end 6 off the board, people. I just don't see where you're trusting that. He has never done it for a full, he had one full season, right? But he's had the injuries. Philip Rivers, who, again, has a long history of heavily targeting tight ends. See Antonio Gates, for how many decades. And I just don't see it with him this year. It's just not happening for me. I've got him as tight end 15 in my rankings. With a decent amount of targets here. 91 targets, but only 56 receptions. 641 yards, 5 touchdowns. Not a terrible season. If you give him one more touchdown, he's a tight end 13, so maybe he goes up a couple. I don't know, but I don't know. I'm just not there with Hunter Henry this year. It's not happening for me. Tight end 6. I mean, I usually wait for tight end anyway, but that's definitely not happening. So yeah. All right, next guy, the Gronk, Rob Gronkowski. I mean, this one hurts me. Only because I want to, I like Rob Gronkowski, and I thought he was going to be a steal. I want to be honest with you. I didn't think people were going to be drafting him highly at all, and I thought he'd be late teens, in ADP, and then I just wait and maybe grab him. And right now, I have him as my tight end 20, and he's going at ADP 10. He's going as a tight end 1, assuming he plays the whole year, which he hasn't in a decade, right? Even assuming he plays the whole year, my issue is it's a Bruce Arians offense. It doesn't throw to the tight end a lot. They still have O.J. Howard. And I don't know how much they're going to play him. And that last one is the big thing for me. So I've only got Rob Gronkowski with 64 targets. 39 receptions, but 5 touchdowns. And that's, it could be 7 touchdowns, right? It could be one of those years where he has a touchdown every 5 receptions, It really could be that way. Because I think they might not play him every down and all the way up and down in the field, but maybe once they're, past the half, once they're past the 50, maybe once they're within the 30, they're going to start playing Gronkowski a lot more. I really don't know. All I know is I'm not expecting some 70 catch season from Rob Gronkowski. And to break into that top 10, you're going to have to be in the 65, to 70 reception range. And listen, if he has 70 receptions, he'll probably have 10 touchdowns. And he'll probably be a top 5 tight end. In which case I'll be awfully wrong. Because if he has the receptions, the touchdowns will be there from Brady. I think this offense is going to move up and down the field, which is why I say the touchdowns could be there. So maybe in a standard league, I can see Gronk, maybe projecting closer to tight end 1. But in any kind of, half PPR or full point PPR, I just don't see Gronk being on the field enough, to really do that. I just don't see him being like the tight end 1. It's hard for me to see that happening. So yeah, I'm not sure. So. That's it, guys. So let's just rehash these tight ends here. The guys that I really like compared to their ADP are Hayden Hurst and Blake Jarwin, who you're probably hearing a lot about both those guys. But the tight ends I'm very low on compared to ADP. Hunter Henry and Rob Gronkowski. The GDP, the GOAT draft position, says do not draft Hunter Henry or Rob Gronkowski this year, not at their current ADP anyway. If they start sliding, I will let you know. So, all right. Well, hey, that's going to do it for us, everybody. That's our episode. Thanks so much for joining us with the GOAT Fantasy Football Podcast. So, hey, the episode, as always, is available on YouTube. You want to look at my beautiful face for an hour, you can. But now, the episode's available audio only on all your favorite podcast platforms. That's right. You can now listen to the GOAT on, what are they? Spreaker? No, that's not a big one. What is it? iHeartRadio, Google, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all of them, all the big ones, and even probably all the small ones. There's a whole list of them that they're available on, and I don't even know half of them. But all the big ones, and I'm sure anywhere you listen to podcasts, you'll be able to find us. That's the GOAT, Fantasy Football Podcast. What's the GOAT? That's the greatest of all time, right? Who says that? I don't know. I mean, I say it about myself. I'm the greatest of all time. This is a brand new thing. I'm already the greatest of all time, right? So obviously just kidding there, everybody. But hope you all had fun. It's a good episode. Going to be bringing you some more draft prep episodes throughout the next week or two, getting you ready for your drafts. And then we have football, baby. It's time. Are you ready for some football? I know. I'm ready. I'm stoked. We got that Thursday game, like a little appetizer, a little nibble before we get to bite into that big ass ribeye on Sunday, our first week of games. Oh man, especially with no preseason games, it's gonna be like just letting the lion out of the cage. Oh yeah. Oh, let's get it again. Oh, all right, everybody. That's gonna do it for us on the GOAT. Have a great day. Thanks so much. Join us for our next episodes. We will see you next time.